So maybe let me start with a few opening remarks. Last year, we didn't have an in-person UN General Assembly. So this year, in a sense, marks the resumption post-COVID-19. It's been a very hectic week. I think in the last 5 days, I've met leaders of almost 60 countries, discussed a very wide range of issues. I would say that I think top of everyone's mind remains COVID-19. Second, there's anxiety over the looming climate crisis. Third, anxiety over jobs and prospects from the digital revolution. And fourth, of course, the concern with how the evolution of relations between the superpowers is unfolding and its impact on all of us in different parts of the world. So it's been a really very hectic, very fascinating time, and the discussions were candid, open, and I think constructive. I just completed my speech at the General Assembly itself, so that I think you'll get the video soon. So I won't go through all the details of that. So maybe I'll stop at this point to take questions, and then we can go on with the interview.
Thank you, Minister. Can we now invite Li Ying from CNA TV to pose your question to Minister, please?
Hi, Li Ying.
Hi, good morning, Minister.
Hi. It's night time here.
Good evening, then. Okay. So when it comes to digital development,
Yes.
what are some strategic issues that are especially important for small states? And on that note, how will Singapore's new Force for Good package help members navigate those interests?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, everyone knows that a digital revolution is underway. Everyone knows that this has got impact on jobs, impact on the economy, impact on relations within the groups within countries, as well as relations between countries. So there's no question that there is a fair amount of anxiety over this. The next point is that there's a lot of focus on the digital divide. And you may find it hard to believe, but even today, we still live in a world where something like 3.8 billion people are not fully connected to the internet. And in the midst of this pandemic, the lack of connectivity means a lot of parts of the world are deprived access to education, to healthcare, to essential information, and of course, on jobs and job prospects. So there's been quite a lot of focus on trying to overcome the digital divide, on how to raise and mobilize finance for digital infrastructure, and then equally the question of skills, retraining, education, so that people have the necessary capability to take advantage of the opportunities which are emerging from the internet. So this has been an area of concern. The Secretary General has launched what he calls a common agenda, which sets out an ambitious goals of basically, making the world future ready. And on part of Singapore, I've expressed our support for this agenda. Now, whether this takes the form in future of a new convention for digital technologies in respect of sustainable development, or it takes a softer form as a set of guidelines or as a roadmap, I think these are conversations which will have to evolve on the international stage. So watch this space. It's not only in Singapore that people are concerned with the impact of digital revolution and jobs and prospects for the future.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to invite Chun Hing from Lianhe Zaobao to ask a question now, please. Chun Hing, whenever you're ready.
Hi, Chun Hing.
Hi. My question is, U.S. President Biden and Chinese President Xi both spoke at the UNGA.
Yes.
And Mr. Biden, he told world leaders that he didn't have any intention of starting a new Cold War. Mr. Xi also said that one country's success does not have to mean another country's failure.
Yes.
So just want to ask, what do you make of the speeches? Do you
Well,
think
I
it's
think
just rhetorics, or there actual political will on both sides to ease tensions?
I listened to the speeches from both President Biden and President Xi. I think they both gave very careful speeches. So, for instance, President Biden said, we must be careful not to tip from competition, responsible competition, into conflict. President Xi said, well, one country's success doesn't mean failure on the part of another country. So in a sense, I think they're both setting up the scenario so that there can be both competition and cooperation whilst hopefully avoiding conflict. Now, having said that, I think we're still in the very early stages of this strategic rebalancing, readjustment, recalibration of the relationship. And you cannot assume that things will always be smooth sailing and nothing can go wrong, or that you can't actually end up with a de facto another Cold War, or even sometimes a hotspot. So this is something which I think everyone is aware of, concerned with, clearly on the part of Singapore and the many other small nations in the world. If there is real trouble between the two superpowers, we are all going to be affected, and affected severely. So let's see how this evolves. On our part, and I think I would say on the part of all the other countries and regions of the world, we have indicated that we believe in multilateralism. We believe in a rules-based world order. We continue to believe that trade, investments, common standards, level playing fields, these are the formula for peace and prosperity for the long term. And we hope that even as the superpowers feel their way around each other, that they will still subscribe to this model of a multilateral rules-based world. And after all, that really is the raison d'etre for the United Nations. So I think, or maybe especially now in a post-COVID world, it is essential for people to get together, to meet face-to-face, have conversations, both private as well as public, build reservoirs of trust, cooperation, and hopefully get into a habit where we can collectively deal with common challenges of the world, which include the pandemic, which include climate change, which includes the digital revolution. And the more we can get into a habit of solving problems collectively instead of causing problems, the better for all of us.
Thank you, Chun Hing and Minister. Can I now invite Akil from CNA Digital to ask a question to Minister, please?
Good evening, Minister.
Hi.
Yeah, you mentioned just now that you've had a hectic week with some of the top topics being the evolution, the relationship within superpowers. Minister, I think we've heard many countries, especially in the region, weigh in on AUKUS. Could I find out from you sort of Singapore's stand on this agreement, the implications for ASEAN, and whether you will discuss it during any of your meetings in the US?
Well, actually, yes, a few countries did bring up this topic of AUKUS, but actually it wasn't really the centerpiece of concern. The real strategic question remains the relationship between the US and China and how they manage this strategic realignment, rebalancing, and recalibration of that relationship. Everything else, in a sense, are secondary issues to that. So question is, will the US and China be able to both cooperate, compete, and also avoid conflict? That remains the primary question. Specifically on AUKUS and these new arrangements between the US, the UK, and Australia, Singapore's position is very clear. First point, when I say we, I mean Singapore, have had a long-standing relationship with all three of them, the US, the UK, and Australia. The fact that we have a long-standing, constructive relationship with large reservoirs of trust and alignment is very helpful because it means we are not unduly anxious about these new developments. The second point is a hope, and we hope that these new arrangements will contribute constructively to peace and stability in our region of the world. And the third is that we hope that these arrangements will also complement the regional architecture, which has ASEAN as its center and a united ASEAN at the heart of it all. So that's an expression of hope, but we'll have to see how this evolves and how other neighbors and other powers respond to these arrangements. I think the key point to understand is that this is really part of a larger geostrategic realignment. And we have to take these things in our stride. We need to understand what are the primary forces acting on these tectonic plates. And in the case of Singapore, be very, very careful to make sure we don't end up in a position which is unviable or dangerous or one which can have adverse consequences to us. But the fact that we are friends to everyone, we're able to speak honestly, constructively, and they know that we're not against any party. That also gives us a slightly unique role and to engage in constructive conversation with all parties. So again, this is something which is evolving even as we speak, and I'm making the point that we will be careful and we will maintain our relationships. We will continue to build those circles of trust, and we will encourage all parties to make a constructive contribution to regional peace and stability.
Thank you, Minister. I think we have two questions on vaccines.
Okay.
Can we have Shahida from Berita Harian to ask the first question and then followed by Kayla from Mothership, please?
Hello, hi, morning, Minister.
Hi, Shahida.
Evening, Minister.
It's okay.
I wanted to ask you about
Yes.
the vaccination program.
Yes.
How Singapore has and will play a role in the world's COVID-19 vaccination program?
Okay, I think there was another question
Yes.
as well, right, on
Kayla.
vaccines.
Kayla, can we have your question for Minister, please?
Hello, Minister.
Hi, Kayla.
My question is about Singapore's vaccine contributions under the COVAX initiative. So Singapore has pledged to donate excess vaccines, but vaccine inequality remains a common topic at the UNGA, with the Indonesian Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi saying that there's a shortage of vaccines and that the vaccines available are not evenly distributed. So I would like to ask, to what extent has Singapore's contributions under COVAX helped to alleviate vaccine shortages in developing countries? And is Singapore planning to donate more? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, vaccine access has actually been a very major issue at the UN General Assembly this year. Everyone, and some even more so than others, has been desperate to get hold of vaccines in order to vaccinate the population, in order to minimize the impact on mortality and morbidity from COVID-19. So this has been a clear priority at the General Assembly. Singapore has been very fortunate. I mean, we were fortunate because we made advance purchase arrangements very early on in the course of this pandemic. We also contributed to the COVAX facility, and even now, as the COVAX facility is in a position to start delivering, we have been in a very fortunate position to say we will donate our allocation to our neighbors who may have greater need for that. So I think you may be aware, if you've been following the news over the last 2 months, we have been making arrangements to donate or to swap vaccines which we have on hand with our immediate neighbors and going as far as even down to Australia. So this is our way of being a responsible global citizen, of being a helpful and constructive neighbor, and of being a reliable, trustworthy partner and stakeholder. I would also point out that EDB has also been very successful, and I think sometime next year onwards you will see the construction of facilities by BioNTech by Sanofi, by Thermo Fisher, so that there will be indigenous vaccine production in Singapore. But again, because actually we are a very small market, everyone knows that those facilities will really be designed to produce and to make available vaccines to a much wider neighborhood. So this is the way Singapore will be a constructive, helpful, and reliable partner. The main problem in the world right now is access and distribution. And you're right, if you look at a global scale, it is still very unevenly distributed. Nevertheless, we are in a fortunate position, and where we can help, we will help.
Minister, if we have time for just one more
Yes.
question, if you can oblige.
Okay, sure.
Can I call on Straits Times, Nirmal, please, who's dialing in from DC, Minister?
Oh, Nirmal, okay.
To ask a question to Minister, please.
I guess I'll be seeing you soon.
Yes, good evening, Minister. Thank
Hi,
you for
good
doing
evening.
this. So on the subject of the pandemic again, what are the prospects for relaxation of restrictions on cross-border travel in ASEAN and, for that matter, beyond ASEAN as well?
Well, I think these are issues that are being actively discussed. For a start, we've got to settle mutual recognition of health certificates, vaccine certificates. That's, in a sense, making sure our digital systems, our ability to verify records are in place. The second step is to actually decide when and how you can actually liberalize and allow travel. Now, this is a much more difficult point because, as you can see, even in the case of Singapore, these decisions on whether to open or tighten depend very much on the domestic situation at that point in time. So right now is a time to be careful, and although I'm away, I'm aware of the situation back home, and the government has had to introduce more measures in order to slow down the spread of the virus, in order not to overload our medical facilities. So that's our priority right now. It's actually a domestic priority. Get to grips with the situation, and then, as we can, we will also look at careful reopening of our borders, especially for Singaporeans who want to return home, or to our key business partners who need to visit Singapore in order to continue operating their businesses, especially their regional businesses. But I just want to emphasize again, our priority, number one, must remain the protection of Singaporeans, ensuring our healthcare facilities do not get overwhelmed. And then, when we are sure we have that in place, then sequentially and safely, carefully open up the borders. So watch this space when we are not out of the woods yet as far as COVID-19 is concerned, both within Singapore and, in fact, at a global level.
Thank you, Nirmal, and thank you, Minister.
Yes.
With that, we've come to the end of the doorstop for today. We are going to lift the embargo on the doorstop. Apologies.